Hello, and thank you, people, for coming to this talk. We're going to be talking about building real life communities, communities based on real life places in Second Life. And I'm joined by Bernard Herzog, who, as you can see from his name tag, is one of the people behind the community New Brighton. Bernard, perhaps first of all, you can start telling me what New Brighton is and which particular Brighton it's based on.
Um, well, it's based on the original Brighton on the south coast of the UK, near London. Those of you who aren't familiar with the UK, it's a very busy and popular seaside resort um, called
It's
Brighton. New Brighton is another resort. Well, it was a resort back in the 50s and 60s. It was a huge resort for northerners, very close to Liverpool. So northerners often get visitors from people up there expecting
the New Brighton.
to be a replica of that New Brighton, but
Right.
it's
It's
not. It bears a passing resemblance to Brighton on the south coast, which is a large city packed with all kinds of amusements and attractions, and I just caught a little taste of it on my little island.
so. What elements did you feel were important to make people feel that it was Brighton?
Um, the beach, the pier, the arches, the seafront.
Mhm.
Uh,
I know the pier. The pier is a magnificent Victorian structure.
yes,
Or have you gone for the one that's now burnt down?
you obviously know a bit about it. Um, no, well, that was my plan to rebuild that, but that hasn't materialised yet. It's quite an ambitious project, but no, it's more closely based on the what's now called Brighton Pier. It used to be called Palace Pier,
Ah, right.
which is a successful and commercial and full of amusements, and
Hmm.
uh, is the only remaining pier now. The other one is very little of it left.
So, have you recreated the amusements as well? Are you making it an amusement arcade, or does it serve another function?
Well, it's kind of evolved and changed over the years because it's been there 7 years and changed. I mean, originally when we only had prims to build with, it wasn't really any attempt to make it realistic. It was almost a parody of a pier, really.
Right.
But over the last 2 or 3 years, then I've been learning to build in mesh, and the current pier is actually quite accurate. Well, it's accurate. It's the first part of the pier.
Mm.
I need at least another sim to do the whole length of it.
Yes, I can imagine. I'm glad you
Uh,
didn't take on Southend.
so it features the arcade, as it's called, which is in real life now. It's actually a big amusement arcade. It's just packed with
Hmm.
amusements. But originally, it was a botanical gardens. It was a fantastic structure with a glass roof, and they had kind of a second floor and orchestras and flowing water and plants everywhere, and it was a fantastic thing. Um,
And so have
so
you,
it doesn't really
uh,
serve any function at all at the moment.
right.
we've, had, we've had some parties in there, and different things have gone on in there. But in fact, I'm rebuilding it. It's about to change again. It's
So how you can change it?
well, I've always had a replica of a Spiegel tent on the sim as well, which
Hmm.
is well, the Spiegel tent comes to Brighton once a year for the festival during May and sets up. Although it's not it's not a permanent feature of Brighton. It's something I love and wanted to replicate. So again,
Right.
there's been a version of that. And the current one's built in mesh and uses an awful lot of resources and space. So the replacement pier will be a blend. The arcade will be a kind of mixture of the arcade on the pier and the Spiegel tent.
Mm-hmm.
And it should start appearing this week, hopefully. It's quite an elaborate construction.
So how many Sims do you have in New Brighton?
Just one.
Just the one. And do you have a residential area as well?
A small there's a few houses to rent, and there will be more once I've freed up some prims and
Right.
space. I'm in the process of reorganising it now.
So are your residents long term? Are they pretty much kind of a community who've moved in? Or do you find that your residents tend to be more transient?
There are several long-term tenants and a few short-term ones.
So it's a kind of mixed
It's a
community.
mixture, yes. I mean, and it changes all the time. There are sky islands as well, just kind of floating islands up in the sky where people can put up their own houses and what have you.
So, is it, when did you start it? I mean, you said that you've been doing this quite a while. When did it actually start?
New Brighton's been there for 7 years now.
And were you one of the people who started it? Or did you come in later?
Well, it's always been my sim. But it was sponsored originally by a local law firm. This was going back 7 years when it was before London Lab set up an office in Brighton. But it was kind of in the boom years for Second Life, and it seemed to be it was growing at a huge rate and seemed to be the next big thing. All kinds of people were really interested in it, and it got a lot of publicity and so on. And a local law firm actually contacted me and set up the sim.
Right.
I mean, they sponsored it, so it was all paid for the first year, which meant that I didn't have to think too commercially. Their idea was to provide legal services in Second Life, and so the island was kind of dominated by an exaggerated version of their real life offices, which are actually down near the pier.
Right.
And they have connections with the art college as well, so we had students exhibiting their work. That lasted for a year, but I was never convinced that they would be able to sell real life legal services in a virtual world. And in fact, they never had time to man the offices, so it didn't really work out. And then in 2008 was when the recession started.
And they
They cut back and they couldn't justify it, and they pulled out.
I think that was the experience of quite many people, because they had unrealistic expectations of what the virtual world could do.
Yes, well, it was, as I say, I was never convinced that would work, but it was quite an unusual set of circumstances, really. I mean, they were the first law firm to set up in Brighton. They had the first telephone here, and they sponsored the art college degree shows for many years, and the head partner there likes, they think of themselves as pioneers, and as I said at that time,
A lot of people were, yes. It was
looked as if it was going to be the next big thing, and so they took a punt on it. And I think I think the plan was to draw in other businesses and give them a virtual copy of their real life businesses but that didn't really work out. I think it always has been a hard sell.
Have you tried to make any more connections after they went? Did you try to make any more connections with businesses or colleges?
Yes. Short answer.
Great. And how successful have they been, I guess, is the follow-on question.
Not very successful.
Right.
I've tried endless things, actually. I've tried a lot of different things. I mean, there's always been a replica of, well, it's not a replica, it's a kind of basic, well, it's a parody really of something called the I360, which is actually starting to go up now on the site of the old pier, the derelict pier. It's kind of a vertical tower, 180 metres high, that people climb into a kind of donut-shaped pod and ride up to.
Wow.
A vertical pier, they're calling it.
That sounds...
That's been in the air for years now, but they are actually starting to build it.
Right.
I stuck one up, I think it was 6-7 years ago.
So people could actually come in and see what it would look like?
No, they didn't get a very good idea of what the real one would look like. There's a general idea. I mean, mine was a donut-shaped pod that would sit in and ride up to the clouds and jump out of with a parachute. Yes, no, I didn't get a response from the architects, the real-life architects, sponsoring my version.
We did a show, Designing World show, a few months back, with the people who were behind the the digital version of the new City of Birmingham library. I don't know if you've seen pictures of that.
No.
They've got a very beautiful new building right in the centre of Birmingham in Corporation Square, and they actually built a model of it in Second Life, which was open to the public but not very widely known about, which was a shame because it was a gorgeous representation of the library. And what they did was they actually had the public rooms, the things like different areas of space. People had an opportunity to walk through and decide which would be the kind of best seating to have in each area, which they thought was most appropriate. So they were able to kind of make this building a consultation document, and they had a very interesting response from the librarians who particularly used it. And they said that when they got into the real building, they could find their way around the public spaces very smoothly and easily because they'd been using it in Second Life. But when it came to the offices that they were assigned, those hadn't actually been built. Those were left out of the Second Life build, and they all got completely lost and confused in the office part of the build, which I thought was really interesting.
It must have been very accurate then. Done from architectural drawings.
Apparently, yes, it was done on the architectural drawings, and people. It was good enough to people to learn their way around. So,
well, I mean, it's been suggested. I mean, the council were apparently interested at one point, but that didn't come to anything. But it's mine is an attempt to be accurate. Really, it wouldn't serve as a guide to the real Brighton. It's just simply too small. It barely covers one city block. Brighton's quite a large, sprawling city, and it would take a vast number of sims, highly detailed, to do it justice.
yeah, this was really just one building with an impression of Corporation Square beyond. And sort of the other side of Corporation Square almost is a sim surround. So they just focused on the library itself.
It's hard to say what its purpose is really, in regard to the real Brighton. It just happens to be the place I live, and there's endless inspiration here that you can kind of pick and mix different features and come up with your own thing. I mean, I expect you're aware that similar to the i360, I put up a very basic replica of Yoko Ono's Imagine Peace Tower, and she eventually saw some pictures of that, and I was commissioned to build a replica of that on another sim.
Right.
Do you know about that?
The Peace Tower, the Finland Peace Tower, is it?
Iceland.
Or Iceland, yes. I knew it was one of them. Yes,
that was actually attempting to be as realistic as possible. The tower itself was about as accurate as it could be made in Second Life. I was actually working from the drawings and documentation of the real one to try and make it as realistic as possible.
Right.
Whereas the new Brighton sim, it's, I haven't really thought this through. It's not an attempt to be realistic. I mean, most things there are based on Brighton things, the houses and the arches, and there's something called the donut groin. It's just a groin.
Right.
Just a short. Well, a groin it's called, and it has a sculpture, a donut-shaped sculpture on the end.
Right. I think perhaps we should explain for American cousins that another meaning of the word groin in English is a sort of seawall, a stone wall that extends out into the sea and breaks the waves.
Yeah, I suppose that needs clarification.
There may not be a term that's crossed the Atlantic to talk about the groin. So
really, it's just kind of jamming using elements of real Brighton to do something that is purely Second Life.
right. Do you think? Do you were saying earlier that you get visitors from New Brighton who are a bit disappointed that it's the other one? But do you find quite a lot of people in Second Life who are in the real Brighton tend to gravitate towards your sim, or does it tend to be people who have some idea of no, some idea, some concept of Brighton, but aren't actually natives to it, who tend to come, or people who just come because of some event you're holding?
Well, yes, all of that, all of the above.
So you get a complete mixture.
Locals, meet Brighton people. I think it's, as far as I know, it's really the only Brighton-related sim. Or there are a couple of other with features of it Now,
I know that
it's a very busy, very cosmopolitan resort, so a lot of people have visited it in real life from all over the world. We have a lot of foreign students here every summer, and several universities and colleges. So there's a lot of people around the world who do know of it and can get quite nostalgic when they come to the sim and are reminded of it.
I grew up along the coast, actually, from Brighton, in the poorer cousin Hastings.
Oh yes.
So, and I've stumbled across a couple of representations of Hastings. You can always spot them because they have the big towers for the fishermen's drying nets, which are quite a feature of them. Do you know Quiet Puzzle? Is Quiet Puzzle a friend of yours?
I'm sorry?
Quiet Puzzle has just shouted, asking you, telling you that. I don't know if you know Quiet Puzzle. Anyway,
Learn to use the mic.
yes.
Have I been whittering on? Nobody's been able to hear a word because I'm not using the mic properly.
Hopefully they've been able to hear some of it.
Perhaps it's clearer on Skype than it is in Word, is it?
Possibly. That can sometimes happen. My voice sometimes breaks down in World, but I think you are good. Thank you, Nathan. It was just a little muffled. Okay.
Okay. I'm facing the mic now. It's not very nice to call people tards, is it?
No, it isn't very nice to call people
Boot
tards.
that person up. Yes, so the new pier will incorporate the venue, which is what the Seagull tent is a replica of a Spiegel tent, which you may or may not be familiar with.
No, do tell me a bit more about this Spiegel tent.
Well, if you look in Google Images, you'll see loads of images of it. It's a kind of a cross between a circus tent and a music hall, and it's a kind of temporary structure. There are about 24 of them in the world that have all basically the same basic design, but they're all different in some way or other. Of course, they have lots of mirrors inside, which creates a fantastic atmosphere.
Mirrors?
Mirrors
That's unusual.
can't easily replicate they can replicate it in Second Life. So. And
No, mirrors are a problem.
We put on shows. So because the arcade on the pier isn't currently serving much purpose, and the pier and the Seagull tent between them use up a lot of resources, I decided it's time to merge them into one structure, which won't be quite like either of them, and yet like both of them at the same time.
I wondered if you have a copy of the Brighton Lanes, which are a kind of famous shopping district.
No, that would be another sim. And
yeah. Okay. Blackbird Latte has actually asked a question. Let's follow through on this. He's saying, I was actually wondering about the business attrition problems in Second Life. Mr. Herzog, do you think businesses that fail to take advantage of SL is a failure to take advantage of things they can do in SL that are not possible in the real world, and failing to conduct business in an SL way as opposed to trying to approach SL in exactly the same way as real life?
Well, yes, that's a simple answer. You'd have to give me an example, really, of the kind of business you're talking about. But yeah, I mean, I can't. I've really given up on the prospect of getting sponsorship from local business of any shape or form in Second Life. It's you know, I mean, I think originally you can see it as I mean, I used to make websites, and did that in the early days when that was a hard sell, and you talk to people about the web, and they say, "Oh, what's that? You know, what do I need that for? What do I need? What good's a website going to do me?" and so on. But of course, nowadays you just take it for granted that any business has a website. I don't think that's going to happen with Second Life. I mean, in the future, maybe.
Yeah, not every business needs a virtual environment, you're saying.
Well, I mean, we can speculate about what might happen in the future, and you know, it's currently I find it a very hard sell. I can't see any sound business reason for real world business to, and it's not cheap to do to set up a virtual version of their business. I mean, you can't promise them extra business as a result of it. I mean, originally, one of the selling points was, you know, just the promotional value. It was kind of publicity worthy, but it's not that anymore. I mean, we were featured in the local newspaper, and it was just a kind of novelty of there being a virtual version of the pier, for example. But yeah, it's not really newsworthy anymore, is it? So I don't know how you sell it to real world sponsors unless there's an angle like your library in Birmingham. There's some kind of practical application.
Yes. It was rather sad, actually. As soon as it was completed and the actual build was open, they closed down the virtual library because it had served its purpose and moved on. And that seemed a little sad.
Yeah, I see what Blackbird's saying.
Yeah.
That I mean, the modelling, the building, that has to be very, very good. I mean, it can be done in Second Life, but it's an awful lot of work, and is a huge investment to create a virtual version that's going to be as good as that suggests. I mean, there must be applications. I mean, I always thought Yoko's Imagine Peace Tower was just perfect for Second Life because okay, you can watch videos of the real one, you can watch a live webcam view of it from a distance, but most people aren't going to fly over to Iceland to experience the real thing. And also,
I was going to say, is it still here? Is it still here in Second Life?
No, it disappears. She pulled out. It was there for 2 years. Of course, yeah.
But it's an example of something that can be done. I know that around London there have been some NHS projects that have used Second Life, which I think is rather interesting.
Well, my new thing I've experienced, I've used this Oculus Rift headset a couple of times, and if you're lucky enough to get your hands on one, you can actually use it in Second Life, and I found it absolutely overwhelming to walk around, actually be inside the sim, you know, in New Brighton. don't know whether it's more overwhelming because it was my work, but or just the experience is kind of better than it sounds. And I mean, I think that could give a whole new lease of life to virtual worlds and Second Life in particular. My thing is that Second Life is, in fact, a very good development platform for that that experience. But that's still in the future. It's still at a development stage. But I think probably within a year or so, these headsets will become generally available and better quality, and that's something to look forward to. And I suppose that links in with what Blackbird was saying, that it'll be a much more immersive and realistic experience. And I think people would be looking for more realism. I don't know, it's a big subject, but with the advent of mesh, we're able to make things far more detailed and realistic than was previously possible. And I think,
Right,
well,
yes, and materials too, of course.
yes. Well, there are no limits. Just you're only limited by your skills and the hardware and the software that you have mastery of. The time you have to devote to these things. Before there was a kind of ceiling on it, which I almost feel nostalgic about. I mean, you had your basic building blocks, primitives, and it took a certain amount of ingenuity and creativity to do elaborate things with them, but there was a limit to what you could do, and so there wasn't a possibility of being 100% realistic. And I kind of miss that in some ways, if you see what I mean.
It's true sometimes that that you can have something that is not quite real, that is actually quite interesting and powerful. I mean, artists working in Second Life have created some amazing stuff that isn't realistic, but is just wow.
Oh yes, the things that could never exist in real life. Yes, I mean that's obviously not the direction that I've gone in, but I really like that sort of thing as well. Kind of kinetic art and so on that couldn't possibly exist in real life. I think the point I was trying to make is that there really are no limits to how realistic and detailed that you can make things if you have the resources, time and the skills and so on. Which most of us don't have. I mean, even if you have the skills,
having the time and the
so that's
possibilities to do it. Yeah.
Constant frustration, knowing where to draw the line.
Well, I would like to ask if anyone here has any questions before we close, because another talk will be starting in a few minutes.
Put them all to sleep.
Here in America, they have the advantage of us. So does anyone else have any questions?
The theme of this interview was particularly something to do with real cities, was it?
That's right. Yes, it was about building communities in real cities in Second Life, right. Drawing on real cities.
Well, it's based on a real city, but obviously it's not a slave to reality. And, there are lots of things which we can do in Second Life which are great fun. And, so we put on shows. We have jet boat racing around the islands, and another feature which isn't immediately obvious is the UFOs. exclusive to us.
Right.
They will be a feature on the new pier. At the moment, you have to kind of search around to find them, but you can fly around in those and blow up the donut on the end of the groin, or shoot down other UFOs, or try and score points in a game.
That sounds fun. You should also
I'm sure
put
there's
out
some
some.
other things that I'm so familiar with. Just
You
forget
should
they're
put out
there.
some tugby boats. If you go around at SL11B, you can see the tugby game where you kind of play bumper cars with boats.
Bumper boats, yeah.
Bumper boats, yeah. Well, that's great fun. Okay, well, I think we've probably exhausted questions from our audience, so I'm going to say, Bernard, thank you very much for joining me this evening.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the chance to rabbit on about my island, which is still there after 7 years.
That's
Touch wood.
brilliant. And good luck with the next 7 years.
Yes, well, it'll start to look very different very soon, so drop by and see us.
And come over and check it out.